Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Trident Talks. I'm Josh, the recruitment director here at Trident, and I'm very pleased to say we're joined by George Glass, who is the head of threat intel at Redscan. George, welcome, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. George, so as I said, threat intel or head of threat intel at Redscan. Tell us more about yourself. Who are you? Kind of your journey up until where you are today.
So I actually started my career as a mechanical engineer in the Ministry of Defence, and made the switch to cybersecurity to work for a financial services company called Fidelity. Since then, I've worked for Photobox, and now I'm at Redscan. My career has mostly been in small teams, and so that sort of lends itself to doing as much automation as possible. Now I'm part of a much larger team at Redscan. The automation is a much larger scale now, so it's very exciting.
Awesome. So head of threat intelligence at Redscan. Tell us more about, I suppose, Redscan is the MSSP and the services you guys offer and what you kind of, I suppose, do day in, day out. And what does that look like now as head of threat intel? Because obviously you previously worked, as you said, in security operations. You've got a great dev background and you love automation. And we will go on to that because I really want to hear about how that's played a part in threat intel and how it will in the future. But what's your role entail now, and what sort of services do you offer?
So my role essentially comes down to understanding the threats that are going to be targeting our clients, understanding their risk profile, understanding the sorts of threats that may go after different industry verticals, and mapping them to our clients. We provide some vulnerability services. So today with SIGRED, it's been a very busy morning. We have a number of ways that we integrate threat intelligence with our platform as well. So again, more automation there, collecting very, very large amounts of threat intelligence data and filtering through it, and providing our clients with a curated feed of threat intelligence into their EDR services, SEIM services, etc., etc.
Do you have a sort of platform or portal that they can log on to collect that? What you do?
Yes, we have a portal called CyberOps, and in there they can receive the threat intel reports that I write, and additionally the threat intelligence is going to be appended to the tickets that we provide our clients.
Yeah, awesome. And they can also do RFIs the other way around, or is it?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, awesome. So, okay, you talked about the volume of data, lots and lots of threat intel data coming your way, and it's almost like a fire hydrant, right? Just mass data. How do you, I suppose, contextualize that is the word I'm looking for. We want to talk about automation, and that's what I'm trying to allude to. Every time I speak to someone about security automation, your name comes up, and I want to hear it from you. How have you finely tuned that? I'm guessing you can't do it or can you do it for every individual customer that you have, or do you do it for sectors? Or walk us through it. How does it work?
Yeah, sure. So you're quite right. It's a pretty large quantity of data now that we're receiving. Something like 6 million attributes are in our MISP cluster right now, and that's for our curated feeds. So that's after we've filtered everything down. And essentially, what I try to do is adhere to the threat intelligence pyramid of pain. If you're familiar with that, essentially you've got patches and IOCs at the bottom, the sort of the low-hanging fruit, as it were. And I don't think that those sort of things should really be looked at by humans unless absolutely necessary. Again, in previously small teams, there simply wasn't time to do that. And so automating that piece is as important as is extremely important. The way that I do that is, as I said, using MISP, and essentially curating a lot of feeds down into a small select set of feeds that target industry verticals, so finance, healthcare, manufacturing industry, defense, those sorts of things. And that curated list of known high fidelity indicators of compromise, that's what we push out to our clients. So essentially, if a hit comes up on those feeds, we know that's a high fidelity hit and needs to be investigated as soon as possible. Usually what we do with these sorts of things is we test the feed prior to rolling out in alerting mode to check for false positives, etc. But once it's released, it should be high fidelity, and a hit's a hit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Do you utilize what, programming, short scripts, or how do you? Do
it? So along with the head of research and development, Paul Sutton, we're building a serverless architecture to deploy this. So we have lots of Lambda functions that go away, crawl the web, integrate directly with MISP. We also utilize another really awesome open source tool called Cortex, which is made by the guys at the Hive. That again is a fantastic way of double checking threat intelligence, going and correlating it against other sources. So there's a number of serverless functions that all go away, do their own little bits, and they subscribe to a centralized topic or queue in AWS, which is the sort of the central pipe for the data that comes in and out of MISP. Another tool that I really like to use is Jupyter Playbooks. Essentially, what is a data science sort of platform, runs Python scripts. That is a fantastic way of going through huge amounts of data very quickly, combined with a library called Pandas, which is designed for folding very large data sets very quickly. That's a fantastic way to go through, correlate, understand, and redistribute lots of data very, very quickly. Again, completely open source, free to use, free to run. All you need to do is host it on a fairly decent server. So those are some really, really good tools I'd recommend anyone to use.
Nice. And you said previously you're moving towards a serverless environment.
Yeah, we're using Amazon Lambdas almost exclusively for this, in addition to ECS, so lots of containers to scale our platform as and when we need it. If a lot of data comes in, essentially the platform will scale to handle that and then scale back down. So we're not paying for huge amounts of server usage 24/7 anyway.
Yeah, smart, nice. I like that. So okay, that's all around the automation piece, and I suppose you talked about the kind of triangle of death within the threat intel world, and the bottom, like the tactical side, right? You're talking about previously about the IOCs and how it shouldn't be, I suppose, be read by humans as much as possible because it's such high volume. You could never ask your customer, would you, to take a look at all of these IP addresses and or take a look at all these IOCs, you ingest them directly. So do you work further up the model as well? Do you work at the operational, I suppose you've got IR there as well, and the more strategic level as well for your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. We provide threat intelligence reports weekly on general trends that are going on. One of the things that we're reporting on fairly recently was a new type of malware delivery method that we discovered that was found to essentially use Autodesk to host the malware, so a very well-known computer-aided design platform. And again, we get that from open source intelligence, finding it in these sandboxing services, analyzing it, understanding what the malware tries to do, who they're targeting, why they're targeting that specific industry, and then we relay that to the clients that we think are highest risk of that threat.
Is that time consuming when you are sandboxing a piece of malware that you found in open source and you are trying to pull it apart and reverse engineer it and go, what can it do? What's its intent? What's its capability?
Yep, that can be very time consuming. YARA rules and things like that help, certainly with understanding what type of malware it might be. In this case, it was a piece of spyware for industrial espionage. But it can be extremely time consuming, can easily take a few days to fully put apart something properly.
Yeah, and you need a very particular skill set, right? Like seriously technical security specialist.
Absolutely. Luckily at Redscan, I'm surrounded by some of the cleverest people in the industry. So that's certainly something great to pull on. But yeah, absolutely. It's not something that maybe an in-house SOC team may be capable of doing or have the time to do.
It's what I would associate with a threat research team that works for a big AV company, for example. And they do that all day, every day, and then they put it through the production environment to test their platform or their software as a service to make sure it brings up those alerts when they push it through.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, now let's look forward. How are you personally, and what do you think personally? Obviously, you're right at the forefront of this industry, and you're constantly, like even this morning, that DNS issue that you spoke about. What do you think the future looks like for threat intelligence? Maybe a bit of instant response as well as we go up the chain. Are you going to, I suppose, try and utilize and enable automation to try and make your life a little bit easier? What's the plan?
Yeah, definitely. I certainly see a larger rise for AI and machine learning, but on the user environment. So people that consume this threat intelligence, which is usually analyzed by artificial intelligence, machine learning, that sort of thing. I can see that certainly trickling down towards the more operational layer. Again, APIs and things like that, certainly an API first kind of approach that people will start taking, integrating feeds into all of the products and services that they use, not just sort of a tick box exercise where you select a few feeds, but actively using the feeds and the APIs to push to firewalls, EDR platforms, those sorts of things. I hope that it becomes a lot more proactive than reactive, and a lot of these feeds can actively stop threats far quicker than we're currently able to do. I certainly hope that that's the future, because at the moment, as with most of cybersecurity, it's a pretty reactionary game, right? But the more that we can automate and quickly deploy these things, the quicker that we can prevent stuff as soon as we know it's happening.
Yeah, I totally agree with that 100%. What's the biggest complaint for a SOC analyst at the moment? It's time, false positives. It's being inundated with just a load of data and just like the whole said, the fire hydrant sort of analogy. So if to be more proactive, a company has to do what? More resource in terms of headcount? Probably not going to happen because it's so expensive. To try and be more proactive in their threat hunting capability, you need to get rid of all those false positives, all of that noise. So there's lots of automation, AI, ML. I think that will really, really help. And then you can actually have your SOC analysts or your security analyst team internally at customer site doing more of what they want to do. If you ask we had a survey recently, and you asked security analysts what they really love doing, it's threat hunting, it's being proactive, it's going out there and finding the incidents or the just building profiles on threat actors and TTPs and goal motivation, etc. before it actually happens. Otherwise, a lot of them just feel like they're sitting ducks, and that's just the way the industry's been for the last 10 years. So I really hope that as well. How do you use AI and ML to support that? It's a big buzzword, isn't it? And obviously, I'm nowhere near as technical or don't have that deep understanding, hands-on experience. But for someone like me, how do you explain what AI and ML does? Is it looking at patterns and how does it work? Any chance of a layman's kind of terms?
Yes, certainly. When I say AI, I don't think there's going to be sort of a Cortana that you download and all of a sudden that artificial intelligence is running your SOC. But there's definitely applications for machine learning for pattern matching, as you said quite rightly, trends analysis and future trends analysis, specifically for things like lifespan of certain indicators. So especially IPs and domain names, understanding the sort of the generalized trend about how quickly those die off, understanding what a specific maybe there's a remote host that's been compromised, pattern matching the sort of the calls that host makes, those sorts of things. Basically, again, to drive down the false positive rate, and to give the analysts an automated why, if that makes sense. So a lot of threat intelligence comes down to, okay, but why should I care?
So what?
Exactly. And if you're just getting a stream of IOCs in and there's absolutely no context around why those things are bad, it's essentially useless. So I'm hoping that the machine learning pattern matching sort of technology that's being developed can provide a lot more of that context automatically, because at the moment it's a fairly human-driven thing to do that.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Lastly, I ask everybody this before I let them go. George, if you weren't in cybersecurity, what would you be doing?
I first trained as a mechanical engineer. Spent a lot of money on that degree that I don't use. So I'd probably be doing something like that. I'm very interested in bionics, so robotics connected to human beings. So I think that's what I'd be doing.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Maybe there's still time. George, thank you very much for coming on. I know I personally found it very insightful learning all around the automation piece, as we spoke earlier before we come on air. Everyone's so heavily focused on the human aspect, and rightly so. It's still really good to go, how are we going to drive this industry forward? And like you said, let the analysts be more proactive in any capacity. It's got to be through automation, or it's got to at least, I suppose, complement what we're doing already. So thank you very much. All the best in your new role at Redscan. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.